Thank you. That was my first question. How long do I have? But it is a true honor to be with all of you this afternoon. On behalf of my colleague Ron Rinholm and the 400 scientists and engineers from Gas Technology Institute, we really appreciate the chance to be here and to talk about not just the future of Gujarat or this university, but really the challenges and the future of the global energy mix and our future as 7 billion fellow citizens. I come to you today wearing two hats. Yes, I'm the president of the Gas Technology Institute that's based in Chicago. And for more than 75 years, we've developed technologies, including shale gas processing and end-use appliances, and over the years trained tens and tens of thousands of energy professionals around the world. Some of you might have attended GTI courses over your careers. But I'm also right now the president of the International Gas Union, which is a 91-country association that's dedicated to the advancement of natural gas, technically, economically, and politically. And we work with a number of bodies around the world, both in terms of companies and associations, to, again, advance opportunities for gas in the global energy mix. In India here, the charter member of the International Gas Union from India is GAIL out of New Delhi. And V.C. Tripathi and his team have been quite active with our organization, and they have the great support of Minister Pradhan and, of course, the tacit support of Prime Minister Modi as well. If you permit me just to sort of tie together how I got here, 6 months ago, I was in a meeting, called to a meeting at the Prime Minister's residence in New Delhi. And I was joined by 12 CEOs from around the world, 12 energy companies, BP, Shell, ExxonMobil, Indian Oil, and others. With Prime Minister Modi, and also with your chairman of this university, Mukesh Ambani, and a number of other Indian officials, both government and industry. And we really talked about the challenge that you laid out. Here is a very important economy, one that's big, one that's growing in population and growing energy demand, one that basically wants to triple its natural gas use. And how are we going to do that in a way that doesn't make an over-reliance on energy imports? And each of us in front of the Prime Minister got to offer, like today, sort of about 5 minutes of suggestions. And I didn't know I was supposed to provide those suggestions to your Prime Minister, so I was very nervous at the time. But I listened around the room. And a lot of the CEOs were telling India what they should do. You should do this, you should develop that regime, you should get your pricing structures in order. And it struck me as I was listening that I offered two suggestions to the Prime Minister. And really one was competency building, capability building, that India needs to develop its workforce, its scientists and engineers, its business people, its regulatory regimes, and all these other things, in order to facilitate this dramatic growth that's going to be required. And the second thing I mentioned to him was a greater focus on renewables. Now, the context I was thinking about renewables in this case was biomass or landfill natural gas, power to gas from windmills generating associating water and hydrogen and the like. But at the end of 3 hours, the Prime Minister delivered his verdict on what he thought we should pursue. And he outlined a number of action plans and recommendations that he made. And then he pointed to me and your chairman Ambani. He pointed to us like this and said, I want you two to work together at this university to engage with GTI to work together to develop new technologies, to train new students, to get that workforce developed, and really provide some assistance to this organization to really help it make a contribution to the Indian economy. And I was honored to receive that direction from your Prime Minister, and I'm a little embarrassed. It took me more than 6 months to get here. But my job with both GTI and IGU and running around the world constantly has kept us very busy indeed. But you do have a tremendous challenge in front of you, almost one that is unconscionable, unbelievable, in that in the course of maybe 10 years or so, you're looking to triple your natural gas usage. But I can tell you from knowing your Prime Minister, and I know you know him much better than I do, he's a man of action, a man that's on the move, that wants to see things get done, whether it's putting 20 million people on LPG tanks up in one of the northern states, to opening markets to natural gas exploration and production, to signing new deals for imports of LNG. Another short, quick story, my chairman of GTI is also chairman of WGL. It's a very large energy company based in Washington, D.C. And I spoke with him earlier this week, and I told him that I was coming to India. He goes, oh, that's interesting. We just shipped our first load of LNG to Gale from Cove Point, Maryland, just like 3 days ago. So again, another tie, but in another, I guess I was heartened to see expression of confidence between India and the United States to connect your gas supplies and supply chains together, but also another vote to really accelerate the pace of natural gas introduction into this marketplace. I can go on and on about the benefits of natural gas, but to this audience, I think you know this a great deal. But what we've been pushing very hard at GTI and at the International Gas Union is the critical importance of natural gas in fueling both economic development in a very rapid way, but also being respectful of the environment. And I don't mean just carbon mitigation, a challenge that we all have facing us in decades ahead, but also dealing with the critical challenge these days of air quality. And not just in New Delhi or Beijing, but Paris, Mexico City, London, where we're dealing with all forms of pollution, from diesel exhaust to industrial contamination to coal burning and so forth. So we have been pushing very hard in our meetings with ministers, government officials, agencies, global agencies, and governments and heads of state to really look at the broad opportunities for gas and the broad benefits of gas, which of course are economic in nature, but also, again, improve the environment. So how are you going to get there in 10 years? How are you going to triple your gas consumption and do it economically in a way that doesn't break the bank? It is indeed a big challenge. I can tell you, there's a lot of people around the world that are here to help, from the big energy companies that I mentioned earlier, to some great institutions like the development banks, to great service organizations like IHS Markit and many others that are looking to work with you to help bring solutions to the marketplace. To very powerful technical organizations like many of our universities in the States, and to GTI that have worked for decades to bring new, advanced, and economical gas solutions and really broad energy solutions to the market. So you're going to have to, obviously, when you increase your gas demand by that much, and you already import more than you produce, you're going to have to increase production. And I guess both offshore and onshore conventional resources. But I understand there's already a test well being drilled for shale. That's something I need to learn much more about, and I look forward to working with your university here to help, and with the companies to help see if we can bring some of the expertise that GTI has developed really in past decades, but really expertise that we're bringing to the marketplace as we speak today, working with the major shale producers in ways to make shale production more efficient. Another quick story. About 20 years ago, one of our board members at GTI was George Mitchell of Mitchell Energy, who really was deemed the godfather of shale gas. And GTI funded a lot of his initial work. But one of the messages I want to deliver about that today is he tried vertical fracking 17 times, big experiments, multi-million-dollar experiments, and failed 17 times. On the 18th time, it worked. And the rest is history. And they got bought by Devon, coupled with the horizontal drilling and all this other stuff. It really became just a transformational technology for gas. And we believe that India has the potential. In fact, probably 10 years ago, GTI did some early resource characterization work for Reliance. And I don't know exactly what became of that, but it's something that we can resurrect. In addition to production, obviously you continue to work to build out your infrastructure, and I know you're making a lot of progress there. I understand there's some big pipes going into the ground for transmission here in Gujarat, but also more to be completed here. And I know your Prime Minister and the Energy Minister has a bold plan to continue to build out that infrastructure. I know there's also been tremendous advancements in terms of the regulatory regime and pricing. And at some point, I think I might even have it here. Yeah, from the airplane today. Conversion of the polluting industrial operations that burn oil, coal, plastic, rubber, scrap, you name it, to natural gas. And just on the flight down from New Delhi this morning, we saw this article in the Hindustan Times. It talks about New Delhi is already 1/3 converted of its large industrial facilities to natural gas, pipeline natural gas. So, you know, I'm frankly humbled and really inspired by the fantastic work that this country, your industries, your people have done in such a relatively short time. And I could go on, and I'm probably already over my time limit. But we at GTI, and I also speak for the broader International Gas Union community, which includes some other institutions like us, that we would very much look forward and appreciate the opportunity to work with you. It's a big challenge, but what I've seen from this country since I've been observing it over the last decade or so, truly impressive, and I have no doubt that you're going to achieve your goals. And I hope that we, in some small way, can be part of your success. So thanks for allowing me to address you today. If there are Q&A, questions and answers afterwards, I'd be happy to address those or to engage you in other ways. But again, thank you very much for your hospitality and for having us here today.
Thank you, sir, for giving an insight into how GTI can play a very important role in tying up with PDPU to improve the economy of India in terms of gas. We have fraternity from the upstream industry here, and on the panel we have Mr. Samir Biswal and representative from IRS. We hope to sign an MOU with IRS very soon, and that was mandated by the Honorable Minister Sri Dharmendra Pradhanji. So I'll ask Gyaniji to comment on that, how ONGC sees gas exploration on new plays on the context of the health policy which has come out from BGH. You can make your comment in short, because I have several questions to take from the people who are of the dais also. So a quick comment from your side, sir.
Very good afternoon, everybody. The initial tone set by Mr. Carroll, we have to go a long way if we have to really achieve 15% gas utilization in India, which is currently at around 6% in total energy mix. Being on the producer side, the first responsibility comes to the production side. We have to supply that gas. Before I go into health and the initiatives which have already been taken by government, I would just like to brief the House the initiatives taken by the upstream sector to supplement the gas production. As all of you know, the 60%, the total consumption, 60% comes from the domestic and 40% comes from import. How we can bridge that gap? In another 5 years, our Honorable Prime Minister has given a target 10% import reduction. By 2022, we have to reduce that import what we are doing today. All the upstream sectors are geared up for that. They have given their plan. Specifically, I can tell about the company where I am working, ONGC. We are expecting that the current gas production is somewhere around 65 to 70 million metric cube per day. Another 5 years, we have a very ambitious target, a very aggressive target to go beyond 100 million metric cube per day. For that, the fields which are on onshore, offshore, we are going to develop, and all the plans are lined up to achieve that target. But coming to the initiatives taken, the help, then FDI, then DSF, lot many things have been done by the government to facilitate and improve the gas, not only gas production, hydrocarbon as a whole. The DSF, which has been brought up very recently, about 1.5 years back, it is to take on board all the interested parties on board who will help the India to achieve and produce more and more oil and gas. Coming to help, then after that there is the price variation what is allowed in case of HTST, in case of CBM, in case of deep water, deep alternate water. All these initiatives have been taken up by government just to facilitate that India should be able to produce more and more oil gas economically in the times to come. I will not go into the specifics of help and other things because these things are readily available. But there is a transition from help, then open licensing. Everything has been done to take on board more and more technology intensive companies, more and more upstream sectors on board so that we can produce and meet the ambitions of India in terms of energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move on to GSPC Director, Mr. Samir Biswal, to react on the same point. Can somebody give the mic to him?
Good afternoon to everybody. Mr. Yanni has already spoken about the new policies initiative taken by the government. The most challenge which I see that our increasing population and increasing demand of energy in future. So currently our energy basket is taken by probably 50% by the coal, 30% by the oil and 6 to 7% by the gas. So with the Paris Convention, we have to reduce the emission by burning the coal and oil. We have to increase the gas consumption. So the government has taken the initiative, government an agenda to increase the production by reduce the import by 10%. It is exactly not a number of 10% because our production is declining, demand is increasing. So 10% is almost comes to 25 to 30%. So that is a big challenge for us. So Government of India came with a lot of initiative to facilitate first how we can enhance the production. So the major initiatives are taken for the last 4 or 5 years. The government migrated this policy from the profit sharing or cost recovery mechanism to a revenue sharing model that is helped to help. Then government also allowed, the policy also allowed that we can do also exploration in a already existing mining lease area, so that it was a constraint for all the operators. If a mining lease is granted for an area, we cannot have another. Suppose there may be many several layers in that area, which can for different geological age group. We are producing from Carroll, so deeper horizons we cannot develop. So that way the government came out with a policy that if you are got a mining lease, you can go for a new, you can do exploration, allow exploration for other areas. Then marginal field policy, small fields which may not be fitting to big companies to their portfolios. They were not, which are discovered or not developed. The policy came to allow the other entrepreneurs to take those fields and develop in a revenue sharing model. Then also it came out to OLAP, that means some of the block earlier government for 9 rounds of bidding, NEL, and previously there were several rounds of pre-NEL bidding. Only government is to demarcate the area and they offer it for the bidding. So parties who are interested, they are bidding for those blocks. The policy changes came is now the government is not allocating the blocks. You can demarcate the blocks of your own and bid for that, and OLAP has gone. This has got other things like that. You can explore all conventional, non-conventional like CBM, shale gas, everything in that block. This is another initiative. Then small and marginal fields, there was another policy came, the small and marginal fields which is expiring their mining lease, so government allowed the extension of those blocks after 10 years. By allowing the operators to submit a new field development program, they have allowed recently few fields have been granted extension for 10 years. Then we give a marketing and pricing freedom for CBM, for HPSD, high pressure and high temperature gases, deep water and ultra deep water and deep water fields, which has got their own challenges. Cost is exorbitant, technology required. So many of the fields which are discovered long back are not getting developed because we are not getting a proper pricing for that in an administrative price mechanism. So these fields are becoming uneconomical and unviable. So government came out with a policy of that we separate pricing which lead to the international pricing and those fields should be developed. So these are the major initiatives taken by the government to enhance the domestic oil and gas production. And for this forum, the expectation from the GTI, so we should from the PDPU, we must leverage the globally available expertise to reduce the market and technology risk, optimize operational efficiency, lower cost, enhance safety, and increase adoption of energy. The major challenges is just that we need a sustainable, affordable, and abundant gas supply to develop our industries. So we need a technology partner in India who can bring those technologies, because gas market is going to be very large and today's gas consumption is also skewed and it is only limited to the some states where it is very proximity to the gas production or proximity to the ports, LNG ports or to the pipeline. As a country as a whole, it has to be distributed geographically, but that greater technology required. That is expectation from PDPU, and we need the help of GTI to support us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The important points as takeaway from your discussion will be kept in mind, and we have a presentation in the afternoon where we'll see how we can match the expectations of GTI and PDPU and see a roadmap and prepare a roadmap for future. We now go to Mr. Vilas Saure, and I request him to keep his comments short. That Mr. David Carroll has talked about that renewable will be one of the important attributes of the energy mix in future, and we need to do a lot since we know each other. We know that we are doing a lot of work in CBM. A quick comment that what is the roadmap of shale gas and CBM from SR point of view?
I think many of you may not be knowing SR was a pioneer in drilling CBM wells in 92-93. We drilled 3 wells in Mehsana which we produced, and then the board was submitted based on which the CBM started. The potential of CBM, now the CBM is reality. In 1 year from 1% we are now contributing 3.5% of the domestic gas production, and definitely intend to go to 10 to 12% in next 2 years. Government of India has been very supportive for us. Already they call it as the early monetization policy, which gives us free marketing and free pricing freedom, which came on 11th April 2017. In fact, prior to 11th April is very positive for CBM, because on 11th April 2018, they gave a whole India mandate, they can extract CBM from the mining blocks simultaneously with coal.
8 developments are under, blocks under development, 3 are under commercial production. And if you see the division, eastern part is divided of conventional hydrocarbons, and where this CBM is there in Damodar Valley Basin. So considering these 6 blocks which are in development, this can have a potential of 8 to 10 million. CBM is not only gives energy, but the mining, during the mining, this gas is liberated to atmosphere. So there is an environmental impact. 1 cubic meter of CBM is equivalent to 30 metric tons of CO2 emission because of ozone layer depletion, the methane loss. So the mining, degasification of mines, which the mandate has been given to Coal India, is going to benefit in terms of environmental. In terms of, as Mr. David said, capability is one, but confidence building that yes, CBM is a business in India is also required. That's what we have demonstrated. Now Reliance, ECL and ONGC has also started. Because of the pricing policy, we have got a highly remunerative price, quite comparable with the, we were able to demonstrate the market that this is alternate to import LNG and we got a good price, which is linked to last year's formula. That price has made the complete development of CBM in the area economical, commercially viable. Second is Urja Ganga pipeline, which was talked a lot about for 6 to 7 years. We are interacting with GAIL. We see it is coming to Durgapur by end of this year positively. So that gives the infrastructure to sell a single molecule of gas. I should not say, but I have played a lot of gas. I can quantify it in person to Anil sir. So considering this, CBM gives a lot of potential. We expect 2 or 3 additional things. One is gas to be brought under GST. Other petroleum products, there are a lot of discussions which will definitely help us. Second is simultaneous policy where CBM can go with shale. In fact, CBM and shale is a synergy because we produce 10,000 meters cube of water and shale requires around 80,000-90,000 meters cube of water to pack. So that water after small treatment can be used. The CBM production is low. Shale production 80% comes in first 2 years, and third is the infrastructure can be shared. So synergy in CBM shale is there. We are waiting for the simultaneous exploitation. And third, of course, not will be immediate unified transportation. To put gas anywhere in the pipeline and your customer can take it by paying $1. If that comes through, this industry is going to boom. Thank you very much.
We have talked about the alternate energy. The gas comes for transportation, gas-based infrastructure and development of gas pipeline, and city gas distribution plays a very important role. I'll now go to Mr. Navade to make a comment that how we are doing on that. 14,500 light kilometers of pipelines need to be created for the smart cities. Your comments, sir.
I think city gas distribution is going to play a major role. It will give a base load for this quantum jump that we are aiming at in India. In any case, we have a very low consumption in India of about 80 cubic meter per person of natural gas. China has about 150, the US other extreme 2367 cubic meter per person. So there is a lot to be done by way of encouraging the utilization of natural gas. MOPNG and PNGRP doing enough by way of unfolding about 100 cities now for bidding. With this bidding, I think there will be a massive push towards utilization of natural gas. CGD as a sector is third in terms of natural gas utilization. It is consuming about 16% of the gas in India after fertilizer and power. Soon CGD will take over power at least, I suppose. And from 16%, if it crosses 21% or reaches 25%, that will be a big help in increasing this push towards 16% or 15% utilization. And all factors from government side are helping this. Now it is for CGD companies also to do their bid and help government initiative when these new city rounds are unfolding. They have to implement faster, lay pipelines faster, reach customers faster, and encourage the utilization. CNG, I think, will drive the gas utilization, because PNG will be slower to come, but CNG can be faster to come as far as the increasing gas utilization is concerned. Yes, there are challenges in solar or renewable energy or maybe e-mobility, but e-mobility now government has decided to not to push conversion of all the vehicles by 2030. There were a lot of issues, many issues to do that. There were structural issues, there were regulatory issues, plus generation side there were issues, and it was in a way conflicting with another objective of reducing dependence on forex, because most of the power is coal based, 65% is generated from coal. So e-mobility would have pushed, perhaps that would not have helped in terms of environmental reducing that carbon footprint and forex side also. So perhaps government has rescinded that, it has postponed that, it is not pushing for that. So CNG should pick up. Renewable, yes, it is challenging, but natural gas and renewable can stay together. That is what I mean, because ultimately environment will be driving concern in coming days. So renewable and CNG CNG or even PNG can stay together.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Actually, we know that government has given leverage for 100% FDI, and in 2 days the bid in DGH will be opening. I now go to the representative from Jyoti Sagar and Associate to talk about how do we see the foreign investment in this new project devised by DGH.
Hi, I am Venkatesh and I am from Jyoti Sagar Associates. You see, let's just basically deal with the issues first. The fact is that 100% foreign direct investment has been the norm in the upstream oil and gas for a very long time. It has been the norm since the time when the sector opened up on the nomination basis, for example. Even on the CBM side, very first nomination rounds that were done was on the 100% FDI basis. Now what has been the elephant in the room is been the issue relating to the contract, the way in which the contract framework has been structured, and around that framework, the regulatory framework that has got sort of come about. Now we have seen myriad of policy making happening in this area. On the gas pricing side, on the side of extension policies, on the side of quick fixes that the developers and the operators have seen. But what health actually has done is try to just basically cut off the regulatory framework and create a new sort of set of framework without getting into the legacy issues. Because let's remind ourselves that parallel to HELP, there will be NELP, there will be pre-NELP and the nomination blocks which are being drilled and for which different policy formulations are in play. So let's just basically talk about how health is going to just create an impetus. In my humble view, we still require a lot of ground work, especially on the contractual framework. You see, when you talk about FDI, what are the investors looking at? Both domestic and foreign. They are looking for the certainty of the outcome in the contract framework. They are looking for the certainty on the enforceability side, and certainly they are looking to see whether the government of India as a regulator, because on the upstream side it is technically through the DGH, it is the MOPNG which is the regulator, whether they have the ability to intervene and therefore create a distortion in the contractual framework. I mean, those are the issues which any investor would be pricing in and would obviously be concerned about. And on that yardstick, I do believe we have a lot of ground to cover and address. I really don't think that the current framework actually materially addresses a number of genuine concerns of the investors. And when I say genuine, I'm not saying that Government of India has been not forthcoming. I think to give them the benefit of doubt, they have been very proactive in addressing and hearing the issues and concerns tabled by the investors. But I think the real heart of the issue would be as to the contract terms. And I'm still basically at a granular level I'm saying this, but I can see that a lot of FDI will not be coming to us simply because we have not given a thought as to the outcomes of some of the provisions in the contract. And that's important.
Thank you very much. LNG import raised sharply in 2017 to 45%. They account for 45% of the total gas supply. India is now the fourth largest importer of LNG in the world. I would request Mr. Anil Joshi to react at how we can improve on the LNG front.
I'm audible now?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Now, to improve on the LNG front, there are at least 4 areas which require attention. One is that we need to understand that our current model of LNG terminals, and of course currently it is largely Petronet's Dahej and Hazira of Shell, operating at close to 100% or even higher load and making money. This will have to change a bit, because if you see worldwide, the regasification capacity is around 700 million tons, while the liquefaction capacity is of the order of 250 to 300 million tons. That means there has to be, the market has to evolve in a manner where terminals which are not running at full load and yet they are nimble enough to pick up the market conditions in a manner, whether through reloads or to price the delivery or market, they need to do. A. B. We are seeing that while LNG terminals are coming up, pipeline infrastructure is not coming in that same pace, whether it is the case of Petronet's terminal of Kochi and others. So there has to be a parallel push on the pipeline, because without pipelines an LNG terminal is just a stranded asset and it cannot reach to the end consumers. So that is the second area where we need concerted efforts. The LNG terminals and pipelines need to go together. The third area where improvement is required is that in buying LNG we need to be more nimble. While our companies like Petronet and GAIL, they have a mix, and even GSPC, they have a mix of long-term and some spot contracts. We need to do more, like GAIL has taken an initiative of setting up a trading desk in Singapore. So similar such models will have to be there, by which we can source LNG at much more economic prices and leverage our strength as being the fourth largest buyer in the world. So I believe if we take these 3 steps, the growth of LNG would continue, and it would be a much more affordable gas supply to consumers would be available. Thank you.
I go next to Mr. Nirmal Sahni. He can throw lights on the market from an assistant energy point of view, how it looks into the gas economy from a market and retail price.
Just yesterday, we brought electricity to the last village. So India is today, by some definitions, an electrified country. Right, so on this occasion, what I also want to share with a few thoughts, but I think a lot of what I want to say was already covered. I think Mr. Biswal, Mr. Kyan, Vilas, they both covered a few of those aspects. What I'll then focus on is something which is not covered today, and the audience I think today is well aware of the main issues, the challenges that India has, large population, growing population, energy poverty, opportunities we present as a market. I think that's known the most. But I think what India needs is a unique solution. We've been doing work around the world, several countries, including in India, and what we believe is gas has a natural partner in the renewable space, the gas and renewable integration, which is taking roots in some parts of the country, in some states. But I think that's an area we'd like to focus a lot more on in our work, either with the state governments or the union government, or with different participants, including maybe with GTI and PDPU, to see what we can do in that space, because we believe that a large market, whether it's diesel replacement whether it is actually using a cleaner and cleaner fuel to stabilize the loads on the grid, the microgrids as well as the major grids, can be supplemented using gas, which is a resource which is available to us today at much more affordable rates, and very encouraging domestic gas production output at ONGC, CPM from SR, and all the other GSPC are coming. So that's an area where we like to focus a lot more and do more on. The other thing I also wanted to mention was that we are seeing as part of India's transition and the global transition in energy, a very important part, which is several types of fuels being kind of nominated in India, right? So, and I think it's a good thing because India needs more of all. We've seen the last 1.5 years, so many fuels have been notified as transportation fuels. That's whether it's hydrogen, whether it's LNG trucking, whether it's biofuels, bioethanol. Everything is now gaining traction in terms of the momentum and the push from the policy side. So we are happy to work with the industry to say, yes, we need more of all. This is not a situation where you want to sit in a closed room and have a tug of war saying which fuel will go, which fuel. Going back to David's example of the meeting he mentioned at the time, Mr. Modi, last year, which was held on the sidelines, was the first ever ceremony which was held outside of Houston, and that's a big statement as well. Ceremony is our annual conference, it's being held in Houston for 36 years. For the first time ever, we got ceremony out of the US, and was to India, and was last year. Right, so I think there's a lot that's going on there. In that room, our Vice Chairman Daniel Durgan shared a 3x3 model that we believe is the model to go forward for the natural gas markets in India. And we are pleased to say that the government has taken notice. The first step that we had proposed in that was a gas hub. There's already a big discussion around gas hubs. I think Gujarat as a location has been identified as a hub as well. And again, a big compliment to PDPU as part of the whole process of determining gas hubs last year. I think about 15 months ago or so, like we were at the same room holding competition for the PDPU students to come and present what do they think and what are their ideas about gas hubs. Right? And again, great quality of work out there. So I think in my summary, what I would like to say is India, I think, is in a transition mode where we're seeing more of mobility, more of urbanization, more of poverty education from an energy perspective, and I think India needs more of all. We cannot, ignore coal. Coal is still the primary source for powering India. Yes, we have very strong INC commitments. Our Prime Minister has gone out, and in the Paris Accord, the 150 gigawatts target, and it's something close to now getting towards in the next 2 years. So I think different fuels complementing each other rather than competing with each other is the way we'd like to see India move forward.
Thank you very much. I now invite 2 questions from the dignitaries sitting in front of the panel. We'll take 2 questions. Keep the question short and precise.
A very, very fascinating discussion. Mr. Carroll, I have a question for you. You mentioned that you're going to increase the competency. What kind of competency increasing do you think will help the Indian industry? I think Indian industry has been going on for 60, 70 years. And I think the competency level of India is quite high. Secondly, you mentioned about the meeting of these CEOs. I see this as a problem because the CEOs come and we are not getting investment. So, these small CEOs coming, meeting the Prime Minister, all this is fine and dandy. But we need to see the money. India needs to see the money. And thirdly,
Sir, just let's limit the question to 2, and I request David Carroll to answer the same. We need to take 1 more question. There is a lunch which is there, which is specifically kept for a PDPU meeting.
Yeah, I think short answer on the first thing, and I didn't mention when I was up there, is workforce development. I think it's universities like this, and it's developing the next generation. We have this challenge all across the world to not just train the workforce of the future in the old technologies, but to couple the platforms of all these new technologies, GIS, artificial intelligence, et cetera, some of which we saw today on our tour, and incorporate that into the energy infrastructure. That's what I was sort of referring to there. On your other comment, I can't really say too much about that. But there is certainly a tremendous amount of interest on the part of global energy companies to participate in India's growth. And I think much credit goes to not just the Prime Minister, but to your industry, to your various ministry officials to engage in a conversation.
Any other question?
So competency has been developed in conventional oil and gas. So I have been PB for last 7 years. It took me for 1 year to remove the shirt of conventional and get into the unconventional. So in a layman language, I say oil and gas is Amitabh Bachchan movie and CVM is Mithun Chakraborty movie. So we have to develop proper competency for that resources.
Okay, Anil Joshi. Yeah, PH Rao sir. Yeah.
Good afternoon everybody, I am PH Rao from Germany. I have a very short question for you and I expected. Actually the potential of CBM and shale gas in this country is still to be ascertained. What are the basins really has got the greatest potential to produce? We are talking about the fiscal regimes and other infrastructure facilities. I would like to hear at least there should be an assessment of the factual assessment of the CBM and the shale gas potential of this country. Thank you.
See, the basic assessment is 92 TCF in 26,000 square kilometer of CBM prospects. That's as per the DGA project. Plus, Coal India, this is not covered on this. But I will like to put a caution this. This is based on all the data which was taken by coal for coal mining. So the data was, I will not be very data was cycloside because that was intention was coal, not the gas. So gas, trapping of gas, getting the gas quality and quantity is a challenge. In last 10-12 years, it has improved. My own block, as per the docket, was showing only 1 TCF of resource. When I did it in 3 years, I improved to 4.4 TCF. This is what there are data available which is outside the block, which is interpreted on that. So unless we go there and get the data, it can be more realistic. It will be upside also for more extent. So we are DGA is doing more and more data based on the wells field is going into their data bank. So on shale similarly, we have to drill the actual wells and then we can go. In fact, there are 600 meters of carbonate shales are present in the eastern Damodar Valley. But when we drill the well, we grow the well, then only we come to know what is the prospects of that area. Thank you.
Mr. David Carroll.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one point. Since we're talking about shale gas and technology, even in the U.S., where we've been doing this, let's say for the last 30 years, over the last decade, shale gas productivity has improved by more than 400%. In other words, the output per well, in terms of dollars, output per dollar of well cost has improved by more than 400%. So there's a lot of technology, operating practices, optimization to be done. It's moving quickly. And I expect that will happen here as well. But even in our mature area, it's still happening very rapidly.
Thank you. I will not take your question because time is short, but there will be an opportunity for interaction in the lunch. With this, we come to the end of the session. Every session should have a takeaway. What I understand from the discussion are as follows: that India should continue its venture in difficult areas, virgin areas, and also deep water and ultra deep water for gas exploration. India should also see the policies are favorable and DGH is working for the same. On the midstream sectors, there is a 65,000 crore investment plan for the infrastructure development, which is also coming in a big way. The market has to be suitable from the consumer point of view, and India gas demand is highly determined by policy. LNG will play a very important role, and as somebody has told, that coal will also be there because 57% is the percentage here from coal. But as David Carroll sir has told, that renewable will be a very important attribute in the mix, and PDPU along with GTI will try to leverage the market and see how our manpower can be trained and be useful for the academia and industry. With this, I invite PG to give a vote of thanks, and at the end of the session, I invite all of you to participate in the lunch, and the discussion should continue because there is a very important aspect which has come out from our own Prime Minister, and we all pledge that we will take it to the level of 15% over the next period, next couple of years. Thank you very much.
I'm really thankful to Mr. David Carroll and Mr. Rodney Greenbaum to come to India during this period. You need quite a lot of endurance and courage. And thank you for showing that. I hope this is the beginning of a long dialogue, and we will continue to have these peaceful communication. We are also thankful to Mr. Omkar Nath Yani, Mr. Samir Biswal, Mr. Vilas Taude, and all other people who have come from the industry as well as from the academics. We have started a dialogue process, and I hope this will not be the end. Please do come frequently here. Let us continue the discussion, because quite a lot of good things will emerge out of this. Thank you for coming.
Introduction, and for really all of you for taking the time to come visit with me today. You know, we've been talking about energy all morning and about what GTI and the International Gas Union and PDPU can do to help India really grow its energy abilities, increase its energy capacity, and in order to meet the needs of a growing population and one that's really emerging as a force in the world. But it's clear to me upon walking into the room that the real energy is all of you. So give yourself a hand. I don't know how these professors can keep all of you in line. There's a lot of energy here, but it's wonderful to be here. I come from the United States, Chicago, and where the gas technology, or GTI, is based. And I'm wearing two hats today. The one hat will be as president and CEO of GTI, and we're later this afternoon going to be signing a partnership cooperative agreement with PDPU, again to help advance a series of energy-related technologies. But I also come to you as president and CEO of the International Gas Union, which is a 91-country association that's dedicated to advancing natural gas opportunities, politically, technically, and economically. And I can tell you the global energy industry, the global natural gas industry, needs people like you. So I do hope that once you finish your studies at this outstanding university, you're going to join the energy workforce, because we really need you. Two things we're going to talk about. The second one is, of course, the download from CERAWeek, which is a gathering of really 4,000 global experts and CEOs and government officials in the energy world. And I'll give you a few takeaways from that, because that just occurred just a couple months ago. So it's fairly fresh news. But I also wanted to share with you just some highlights from a presentation I gave at the International Gas Research Conference in Rio de Janeiro a few months back. It's high level, not real technical. It's got some neat pictures, but gives you something to think about as well. And I mentioned GTI. It's an energy technology services and research company that's based in Chicago. About 400 scientists and engineers, really working across that energy value chain of supply, conversion, which is converting various forms of energy into other forms of energy, delivery through pipes or wires, and then utilization at the end point, be it a house, a kitchen, a restaurant, a steel plant. We're really dedicated, not just as an institution, but really as an industry, really as a global industry, to expand the supply of clean, affordable energy, make it available to all. We want to convert that energy into clean fuels that power economies, improve the environment, and create job opportunities for people. We want to make sure that energy infrastructure is safe and reliable. It doesn't blow up, it doesn't fail. And we want to make sure that when we do use energy, we use it efficiently. We minimize greenhouse gas emissions. We minimize CO2, we minimize methane emissions. And we save costs to industry and consumers. We at GTI work with a variety of companies and institutions around the world. A few of them are listed there. I will say that there's a CRI in the second level in the middle. That's a subsidiary of Shell. And we have started up at Shell in Bangalore a biomass to drop in liquids fuel plant that's up and running. So GTI's commitment to India has been present for quite some time, but it's taken a huge step up with the Shell facility that's operating our plant, and then with this agreement that we have with PDPU. And education, that's where you come in. It's critical that we develop the workforce for the global energy industry in this, for this next generation. You might be well aware that India itself is already emerging as a global powerhouse, but will be dramatically increasing its energy consumption and its energy production. For example, natural gas alone, which now represents only 6% of your energy mix, will be tripling approximately to more than 15% in about the next 10 years, which is going to require technology, investment, infrastructure build-out, but most importantly, a talented workforce, which is where you come in. And these education programs will be the first and high priority focus that we will have as GTI with PDPU. I already mentioned IGU briefly. These are our member organizations, but again, it's really, just think of it as the global natural gas industry. India is well represented in this association. Your charter member is out of New Delhi. The company name is GAIL, formerly known as the Gas Authority of India Limited. But they're very active in our organization, and we expect that they will be much more in the future. And this is an organization you can leverage to create opportunities for you as students in the global energy world. Opportunities to learn, opportunities to network, opportunities to frankly find career opportunities and job opportunities for yourselves through networks like this as well. So let's get into some of the comments I made in Rio a few months back. COP21, the Conference of the Parties, the climate change conferences. The big one occurred back in 2015, although they happen every year. But the big one in December of 2015 was in Paris, and it was clearly a call to action to address climate change. There were more than 78 signatories of these countries that signed on to develop policies and programs to minimize greenhouse gas emissions, to improve energy efficiency, and minimize the environmental footprint that we have as an energy industry and really as a society on our planet. So this was not a flash in the pan. Not everybody believes in climate change, but what I can tell you, most scientists do, I do, and the investment community, the companies, will be for the next number of decades working aggressively to address minimizing the impact on the planet. One of the areas of focus for your university here, and for India in general, are renewables. And this looks like the facility you have right outside the building here. And many of you are aware of the dramatic increase in productivity that we've seen from the renewable sectors. And of course, solar energy is a great example. We've seen those bar charts there as the amount of panels increase, the number of acreage of panels increase, we get economies of scale. And that little red line, the costs come down. Dramatic improvement, just dramatic improvement. And it's well noted. But another point I like to make when we're giving much due credit to the renewable sector, which we clearly need, is to not forget that some of the existing forms of energy are also making considerable productivity improvements. This is shale gas. It's not coming in real well, but this is that's a picture of where I grew up in western Pennsylvania, United States. It's the home of one of the largest gas deposits in the world called the Marcellus Shale. And there's a little well right in the middle, just very small there. And that's the only well that serves that area for miles. But what you see in the bar charts, and all you really have to do is look at the directions, that over the last decade, we've seen the cost of oil and gas production from shale also improve by 400 to 600% in terms of dollars per output of a well. So natural gas technology at the upstream level that many of you are involved in has evolved at a pace virtually identical to the pace that we've seen in the solar space. So there are needs for technology, needs for human energy, for human capital across the energy spectrum, not just in what you think of in terms of the no-emission renewables like wind and solar, but also in gas and oil. There's a great amount of work to be done. 80% of the world's energy still comes from fossil fuels. 80%. About 20 years ago, it's a little over 80%. Not a lot has changed. Well, a lot has changed, but we still rely tremendously on fossil fuels and need to continue to work to make them more efficient and more friendly to the environment. Another chart I like to show, sorry for talking about the US, but it really illustrates a really good example of gas and renewables working together. The top line of blue dots coming down, that is coal and oil in terms of energy consumption in the United States over the last 20 years or so. And you can see it's on a steady decline for a number of reasons. Gas is replacing coal to generate power. Fuel economy standards are higher in automobiles, so they're using less oil. But you see that coming down. The lower bar is natural gas and renewables working together to displace the coal and oil. Meanwhile, overall energy efficiency is improving. But when we talk about energy transition, the transition to a lower carbon environment, this is sort of energy transition in practice. And it can be done. And it can be done in a relatively short time, where you go from, let's say, 30% gas and renewables up to over 40% in just a course of 10 years or so. And that's the kind of pace that we expect from India. I know that's the kind of pace that your Prime Minister, your ministers, and your senior officials believe will take place here. A very dynamic place, and one that I'm sure will even be able to exceed these types of results. Air quality. We're not picking on New Delhi, although that is the main picture in the bottom. But this really is a challenge around the world. Beijing, Paris, London, Krakow, Poland, you name it. And one of the things that we've been doing as GTI and also as the International Gas Union is making sure that policymakers recognize that while we are addressing long-term climate effects and carbon emissions, we have to address short-term, very acute effects of hazardous air quality. Many of you know that as many as 8 million people a year die prematurely from poor air quality. About half from indoor air quality, about half from outdoor air quality. And natural gas can play a key role in that, in creating a cleaner energy source. And I encourage some of you that might be interested, go to igu.org and download for free some of these reports, which are case studies from specific cities around the world with real data that look at air quality data before implementing a clean air program with natural gas and other factors, and after. And they're dramatic. It's Beijing, it's Toronto, it's Istanbul. There are a number of examples that might be useful to you as students, but also to your policymakers and your professors. Addressing energy poverty is key as well. Congratulations to India. You are no longer on that list. I understand you just electrified 100% of your country as of yesterday or the day before. So that's, congratulations. That's tremendous. That's tremendous. And I know there's much more to be done for all of us around the world, and much of this applies to sub-Saharan Africa these days. But it's critical that we get affordable, relatively clean energy into the hands of people that can use it for clean cooking, for light at night, to enable education, and really to enhance quality of life. And we in the energy business, I feel, and I hope many of you end up in the energy business, have a higher calling than just making money for our companies and ourselves. But energy, like education and like healthcare, is really an instrument of quality of life. And keep that in mind as you're choosing your career profession, because you can really make a difference. The energy business is one of just tremendous scale. Many of you know this. You might work in the labs, but when these things get implemented on a large scale, whether it's these LNG facilities in Queensland, northeastern Australia, or the huge refineries you have off the coast of, or I guess on the coast of Gujarat, that Reliance runs, the largest in the world, it's just an immense scale. And that scale signifies technology prowess, huge capital infusion, a great workforce, high technology, and it really is an amazing industry to work in. And this example, this Australia thing, is an amazing place. I was there a couple years ago. These are three large LNG facilities that were built to take advantage of the coal bed methane that exists in Queensland, Australia. So these three big facilities were built at the same time by the same engineering company. They're fed by three separate pipes from lots of different natural gas fields. They were very expensive, but they're massive in scale. They're very impressive. But they were very expensive because they were built all at one time, and they put huge demands on the workforce, engineering workforce, construction workforce, and so forth. But these plants are sold out, and they're fueling much of China's growth. I assume some of them come to India as well. I'm not sure. I do know a major shipment from the U.S. left for India just 2 days ago. But it's just immense scale. And downstream conversion. Something to think about for technology in the future. This was the Pearl gas to liquids facility in Qatar. It converts natural gas into a variety of usable liquids. Huge facility. Tens of billions of dollars in capital spent. We're not going to see too many more of those, because companies at that kind of scale, companies literally are betting their existence, and executives are betting their future careers on whether or not the pricing assumptions hold up and so forth. So one of the challenges for you as innovators and researchers in the future is to figure out ways to reduce the scale of energy facilities in a way that just doesn't kill the economics, such that they can be deployed in more bite-size environments, bite-size locations, where you're not placing a huge bet, and one that can situate these facilities closer to market, minimizing transportation cost, and sized according to the needs of the local market. I mentioned we continually, as energy professionals, need to continue to work to minimize the impact that energy production, transportation, and use has on our planet. That includes, of course, putting more renewables into the system, like solar and wind. But again, since 80% right now of our energy mix comes from fossil fuels, let's also make sure we tackle that big piece and reduce the environmental footprint there. And one of the challenges that we issued to the gas researchers at this conference was to tackle the challenge of reducing methane, which is the primary constituent of natural gas. And it also is a very, very powerful greenhouse gas, much more than CO2. To minimize those, reducing flaring, capturing methane at the well, tightening up gas pipeline infrastructures to ensure they don't leak, making sure that you employ high efficiency combustion systems to ensure that no methane goes uncombusted. But that's just one example of the tremendous commitment that we have to make as an industry to minimize environmental impact. This is something our energy industry has to work on as well. This, I'll give credit here to PricewaterhouseCoopers, a consulting firm and also a financial accounting firm and the like as well. But they took a look at some of the emerging platform technologies that are affecting everything. And many of you are involved in these as well. The internet, it's been around a while. But augmented reality, social mobility, robots, 3D printing, we saw some of that today. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, which is going to be a big one. And not just Bitcoin, but the way companies are going to manage their supply chains. But one of the challenges that we have as an industry is we haven't, arguably, been very good at applying these 8, and there's probably more, essential technologies to our energy production, transportation, and use. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for your generation to do just that. We need it. Does that make sense? Can anybody explain blockchain to me? Couple. Oh, good. Later. Yeah.
Basically a list of all the transactions, or we can say a list of all the transactions that have been done in the past till now. So that it ensures the security, it ensures very good security. There is a list of each transaction listed one by one. So it is a good technology for keeping the things secure.
Yeah.
Like using Bitcoin and all.
Right, right. Thank you, thank you. I knew somebody would do something about it. Yeah. Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thanks for stepping up there. So, believe it or not, when I gave this speech a few months ago, this is the quote I used. And I didn't know a few months later I would be here in Gujarat state, basically with this charge to our young workforce. But again, this talk, I just provided some excerpts from it, but really was to get the emerging workforce of our industry thinking about some of the challenges we have, some of the fantastic opportunities we have, and the fact that it really relies on people like you. The workforce, my generation, which is been around a while and in the not too distant future will be retiring, looks forward to turning the keys of this industry over to you. So we have full confidence, and the future depends on what you do today and tomorrow, and I can't think of a better person to quote, especially on this day, than Mr. Gandhi. So that's the first part of my talk. I'm going to do a time check to make sure I'm on track. I can stop and we can do Q&A, or I can go a little further. Go ahead. He asked for it, sorry. Okay, so this was Sarah Week. It's put on by IHS Markit, that's headed by Vice Chairman Dan Yergin, one of the true gurus of the global energy business, wrote several books on the subject, and really is a historian as well as a brilliant man. But it's a gathering of 4,000 this past year of the global energy leaders, including many from India, including Minister Pradhan was there as well. So we heard from some of the keynote speeches actually were quite good across the board. We did hear from Secretary Perry, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, who has just launched a joint task force with his counterparts here in India to promote natural gas industry development here in India. And Ryan Zinke, our Secretary of the Interior, both talked extremely favorable about the role of natural gas as a tool for economic development, a tool for global connectivity, and a tool for improving the environment. Thank you. I could use a little of that. So that was some of the highlights. In fact, that's Secretary Perry, who gave a fantastic speech. We don't need to choose economy or the environment. We can embrace both. And, very importantly, coming from the United States, we have a moral responsibility to reduce the number of people that don't have access to energy. And again, I know you've made tremendous strides here. We as a world have a lot more to do around other parts of the world, but it's clear and it's a very important mandate. And Ryan Zinke, Secretary Zinke, talked about the strong positions the U.S. has in gas. So, we talked about climate, came back to the climate change. Where are we now? With President Trump and some of the concerns about the U.S. participation in the Paris Accords. Are we not? What do the experts say about that? Well, first of all, Paris wasn't enough. The targets that were set there, if fully implemented, which are doubtful to begin with in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, they won't be sufficient to minimize the amount of warming. We need to go further. So more technology, more commitment, more investment is going to be required. Need to affect the proper balance between increased energy to fuel quality of life and emissions. But that's important. There are some that would argue, quality of life be darned, let's just reduce emissions. But we can't just do that. And this took a look, some of the data came up, just year over year, 2017 to 2018, looking at the either increase or decrease in carbon dioxide emissions, CO2 emissions, from China, the rest of the developing world, the European Union, and then the U.S. And it looked like there was, one country. I think there were actually a couple countries that actually reduced from 2017 to 18. Our secret in this, U.S., was replacing coal-fired generation to a large degree with natural gas, which burns at 1/2 the CO2 emissions. That's how we reduced it. It's not necessarily a prescription for India or anywhere else. That's just the reality of the U.S. So I guess one point I'd want to leave with you that might read the headlines sometimes is the U.S. remains committed to the spirit of the Paris Accords. Our industries, our companies, our state governments are all continuing to drive improvement in this area. This was interesting, that 70% of new energy demand over the next decade or so will come from the power sector. Not from fueling homes, not from transportation. This is all energy. It's really coming from powering up the world and electrification in even in developed economies where you're converting more and more of your energy usage to gas. Electric vehicles is an example. So 70% of the actions, electricity. 70% of the action, frankly, is outside OECD, outside North America and Europe. It's one reason why we're here working with PDPU. It's where the differences can be made. I think I already talked about this, so I'll move along. We haven't officially pulled out yet. That's not until 2019. And President Macron from France was just in Washington last week, and he was beating on Donald Trump to remain with Paris. We'll see how that comes out. But again, whether or not we're officially in or not, industry, state governments, and our society will continue to move in that direction. Yeah, I just wanted to come to the last point. The U.S., the last climate change conference was put on by Fiji, but they couldn't hold the conference in Fiji, so they held it in Bonn, Germany, which I went there, but I would have rather gone to Fiji. But one of the things that happened at that conference is that coal was put back on the agenda, albeit clean coal. But it's so important to so many economies, India included, that you can't ignore it. You can't just say we're not going to use it, because we're going to use it for decades. But let's figure out ways to use it more cleanly, more efficient, better scrubbers, better gasification technologies, direct conversion to other fuels, you name it. But coal is back on the agenda, and I think that's going to be a major source of focus here in India as well. So let's talk about oil. There was an oil panel with the CEOs. Again, this is just, again, some general impressions, sort of the state of the industry, if you will. Let's talk about oil. It was optimistic. Last year, it was pessimistic. Prices were way down. Prices are working their way up a little bit, in part because the Vienna agreement for OPEC to limit its production seems to be holding, and Russia seems to be working in sync with that. So it's somewhat constrained supply to match demand. The U.S. is still a swing producer with its shale oil, but it hasn't been able, it's kept prices in check to some degree, but so anyway, that's a positive mood, and demand's picking up because of the recovery in the global market. Prices, as I said, have reached a sort of a fair equilibrium, and peak oil, which was talked about for years, we're running out of oil. We don't know where to find it anymore. We are so far away from reaching peak oil. I think we'll be running out of demand for oil before we run out of oil. Just like the Stone Age ended not because we ran out of stones. So we will, I think there's a lot of oil from shale and other unconventional resources that we haven't even found yet. So it's out there. But again, more and more technology will be required to bring that to the marketplace. Yeah, that one. 1987, fossil fuels, 81% of global energy mix. Actually, today it's 80%, not 81, but not a whole lot of change. And I'm not sure how to feel about that. With everything we've done with solar and wind and renewable, I thought we would have done a little better. But again, it just speaks to the massive scale that's needed to provide energy to this growing world and a world that's increasing its standards of living. It's a huge challenge. We heard from some of the CEOs, Pouyanné from Total, Ben Van Beurden from Shell, Petrobras, and Saudi Aramco. Let's see what they've had to say. Patrick Pouyanné from Total, and they are good. Be good at what you do. And the integrated models have these big companies that, and you might know, I mean, Total is a huge oil producer, a big gas producer. Anybody know Total? You've seen them as you fly in and out of the airport and all that. They also announced that in 30 years, they're not going to be an oil and gas producer anymore. They're going to be an electricity producer. They're going to turn that big ship from oil and gas to electricity. Now they're going to use gas to generate it and some other things. But the companies themselves are transitioning their product mixes to meet the needs of the future. Shell is a leader as well. You might not know, but Shell and Total and NG, which is the old GDF Suez in France, and many others, ExxonMobil, are making huge investments in renewable energy, in solar, in wind, carbon capture technologies, and so forth. And they've expressed their commitment to do this. Shell, again, harken back to what I said before, the Shell plant in Bangalore, or Bangalore. Biofuels, or fuels that come from biomass sources, are a major part, well, a significant part of Shell's product mix in the future, according to their CEO, as well as other investments in gas and LNG, liquefied natural gas, and so forth. But they are diversifying their product mix right before our very eyes as well. And they also stressed, and they are a big leader in methane, that greenhouse gas I talked about earlier with the flare stack, methane mitigation and reduction. Petrobras, improving operational performance. Brazil, another big developed country, huge population, large economy. They've had some troubles lately at the sort of at the governance level, both at Petrobras and their national government as well. But they're pulling out of that, and they have tremendous, like India, have tremendous energy resources to exploit. And it's good to see that Petrobras is getting on track. And how about Saudi Aramco? Oil industry's healthy. It's interesting that Saudi Aramco also is diversifying its energy mix. And they realize that as a nation, they're not going to be able to rely solely on oil revenues in future decades, and certainly in future generations, when the world has moved on. And so they are looking very much to diversify in their economy, making petrochemicals, making renewable energy, and even expanding into the service businesses. And we're still waiting. He wasn't real specific on when the Saudi Aramco IPO, the initial public offering, will take place yet. But I would imagine it's getting sooner now that pricing is improving. But again, all three of these big countries or companies, I guess they're principally companies, not just countries, but are diversifying their energy mix and moving into the future. The head of the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, in this session on methane. Again, it's a big challenge, and we have the technology right now, if we have the willpower, the desire, and maybe the money, to fix 75% of the methane challenge right now with existing technologies. And that should be a priority, again, to address this powerful greenhouse gas. And I know that some of you are going to help us do that. Some other data from Stanford suggests something similar. It's really about the 80-20 rule. Anytime you have a problem or an opportunity, that 20% of the effort gets you 80% of the benefit, or something to that effect. That's the case here with methane. It's the case with emissions. And it's really not a North American issue. It's really a global issue, even though so much of the academic work has taken place in the U.S. But I'm proud to report that IGU and the energy industry has teamed with major environmental players, such as the Environmental Defense Fund, the OGCI, which is the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, to really work together to address this greenhouse gas challenge. So there was discussion about gas and renewables. We talked about this today. Are they competitors or partners? And we need them both. Clearly, need them both. I think we're getting set up for a little signing ceremony. Hope you don't mind. We're going to impose on your time today. But you know, any mix, any fuel mix, as you're designing the fuel mix of the future, it's got to be sustainable, it's affordable, it's got to be reliable, and it has to give you a secure sense of supply. And it goes without saying that renewables alone can't quite deliver that right now. And you might argue that fossil fuels alone can't deliver that by themselves right now. So working together is critical. But we do have to get real on what we can accomplish and what's needed. Again, that balance of economic opportunity and environmental responsibility. And not just leaping to the solution that you think is going to work, but developing the technologies which are really the tools that enable policymakers and industries and companies to respond to the challenge. And again, that's where you all come in, developing the tools. And gas is going to be a key enabler of this transition to a lower carbon future. But I've already mentioned the dramatic increases in renewables, both with solar. We've seen offshore wind decline by 70%. All forms of energy have taken up the mantle, taken up the challenge of getting more efficient. We're seeing an interesting move in the fueling area. I know India is very big on transportation, fueling with natural gas, with CNG. We're seeing a move by a sector of the global shipping fleet to cleaner fuels, whether it's cleaner, low sulfur, lower particulate diesel fuels, or in many cases to LNG, liquefied natural gas, which burns cleaner. We're seeing it in cruise ships. Carnival has, it's either 9 or 13 ships. Disney has just ordered 4 LNG ships. There are ferries all over Europe that are running on LNG. It's going to be a growth market for maritime transportation in the future. I won't get into some of the specifics there. That's a little bit, looks too much like a class. So I just wanted to, again, in closing, thank you for the courtesies extended to myself, me, and Rod Rinholm from GTI today. By your presence today, not only do you do us great honor, but I hope that it's a signal of your commitment as the future energy leaders of tomorrow, that you're interested in helping the energy industry advance, helping India advance, helping the state of Gujarat advance into really an energy powerhouse, and really creating a brighter future for all of us. So again, I thank you for your kind attention, and I would be happy to take any questions if you have any. Do we have time for any questions, or 5 minutes? Any good ones? Any easy ones for me? There's one over there. Yes.
Yeah, the companies and other states will step up to offset their commitments. The similar approach was given by Jay Inslee and former US Vice President Al Gore at the World Economic Forum. But the thing is that technology that is to be come from USA and the soft loans and aids that are going to be coming from USA, that will not come from the administration. So what will offset that, particularly the capital expenditure? And second simple question is that India is going to be importing gas from United States, but the quantities are so low, like 3.5 million metric ton per annum for next 20 years. That is so little quantity. So is that something that India is holding in their hands to get good bargain from the Qatar, from where we import most of our gas?
Okay, a couple great questions. I'll restate the first one, then I'll answer it briefly. So I guess with the U.S. potentially pulling out of the climate change, will other countries step up? Where will the technologies come from to meet that? The first thing I'll say is we haven't officially pulled out yet. And the second thing I'll say is that the companies remain committed to reducing carbon emissions in line with the projections that we're committed to. Also, in the United States, the way our government is designed, I think it's like India as well, the states have a lot of power. So states like California, New York, even Texas, which is the largest wind generator in the United States, even though they're the largest oil producer in the United States, are tightening their standards in ways that will allow the nation to meet those. Now, if we're talking about tackling climate change, and I will say China has attempted to step into that void a little bit as well. But remember that 70% of energy growth over the next couple decades is taking place outside the US, outside Europe. So it's really about what India does, what China does, what Southeast Asia does, the Middle East does, and so forth, in terms of adapting and evolving their energy mix. Now, I think the other question was about U.S. LNG. The LNG market, liquefied natural gas market, is only about 10% of the global natural gas production, but it's by and large the only way that gas gets from one country to another. There's there are pipelines in Europe and from Russia and so forth, but most transactions outside of those pipes take place through LNG. And LNG is growing at twice the rate of natural gas globally. And there are a number of new players in the natural gas market, both as buyers, like India, which is stepping up in a big way and is now number 4 on the list. It's Japan, now China, because they've just surpassed Korea, and then India. So you're in good company. But new sources as well, and the U.S. is emerging as a major producer. And we're going to have low-cost gas in the United States for decades to come because of U.S. shale. But it still is an expensive proposition to use all that power to liquefy gas, stick it in a ship, send it halfway across the world, and then re-vaporize it and stick it in your pipes. So, Qatar is a good source as well. But one thing that we've learned in the energy business is that diversity of supply is really important. You should have good domestic sources, both onshore and offshore. You should have a nice mix of who you buy from, so you have options. Because you can never quite predict the future in terms of pricing and availability. But India, I think, is fortunate to have not just domestic opportunities for more production, but a great number of import opportunities as well. And you do drive hard bargains in purchasing, so I think you'll be in good shape. Repeat the question. What do I think the potential is for FSRU? Who knows what FSRU is? Couple? One. It's a floating regas and storage terminal gasification, FSRU, unit for LNG, liquefied natural gas. It's basically a ship that you float up to a port and you connect some pipes to it. And then you can bring LNG from other ships and put it on that. And basically, instead of spending billions of dollars to put an LNG import terminal, which India has several, on land, you can float them up. And there are a number of them that have been deployed, and more are being constructed right now. And it's enabled a number of, I'll call them mid-tier importers, currently, like Egypt and Colombia and some others, to actually get, in a relatively short time, for a relatively low cost, a source of gas supply in the marketplace right where they need it. And I think it's a tool, and really it's a source of business model innovation that is creating a lot of value right now.